More than 18,000 Palestinians, including over 7,000 children killed. More than 80% of the population, 1.8 million people displaced. Almost 100 journalists killed, the highest in any global conflict in more than 30 years. And more than 100 UN aid workers killed, again, more than in any conflict in UN history. This weekend, the UN warned that half the population of Gaza is facing starvation. Mr. Chairman, behind these horrifying statistics are real people. People with names, hopes, dreams, families, friendships, just as real as yours and mine. And so I'd like to start this debate by talking about Noor, a 17-year-old student from a town just south of Gaza City who wanted to be a doctor when she left school. In a page recovered from her diary, Noor spoke of her hope to make her family proud. Noor was killed when an Israeli airstrike hit her home on the 11th of October. I'd also like to talk about 26-year-old Safa and her baby girl Eliana, who were killed in their sleep when an Israeli fighter jet bombed their house in the southern city of Rafah. And then there's Reem, whose lifeless body was cradled by her grandfather after her family home in Al-Nusra refugee camp was hit by a strike. Her grandfather Khalid stroked her hair and kissed her goodbye for the last time, pinning her earring to his jacket as a badge to remember her by. She was the soul of my soul, he said. But Mr. Chairman, the horror is so extreme, it would be impossible to talk about all the people indiscriminately killed. Just to list the names of all those who've been killed, let alone tell their stories, would nearly take 20 hours. And I say this because I want to remind my colleagues, I want to remind the House, because it seems like we need to remind everyone of the shared humanity of those being slaughtered in Gaza today. And I do this because whether we like it or not, this place is deeply complicit in the atrocities we are seeing being inflicted on the Palestinian people. Not only does the British government provide vital diplomatic support for Israel, most recently joining the US as lone voices, refusing to call for a ceasefire on the UN Security Council, a move that the US shamefully vetoed, but we also supply the Israeli military with hundreds of millions of pounds worth of arms. The true figure actually is shrouded in secrecy. Though what we do know is from open export licenses, where arms companies can export an unlimited quantity of specified equipment with no further monitoring and no tracking of their total value. But what we do track is called closed export licenses, and we know that the government has handed arms licenses to the Israeli government worth £474 million since 2015. Included in these licenses are parts of F-35 fighter jets, that stealth aircraft that are currently unleashing hell on Gaza. According to US arms company Lockheed Martin, who are the lead contractor for these jets, they are, and I quote, the most lethal fighter jets in the world. And in British factories, 15% of parts for these aircraft are made, including at a factory in Brighton, which makes the weapon release system on the jet, allowing it to unleash deadly airstrikes on the people below. So we have to ask the question, was it a British-made release system that sent death screaming onto Safa and her baby girl in Rafah? Was Noor robbed of her dream of becoming a doctor because a British-made weapon fired an airstrike on her home? And were British-made arms involved in robbing Khalid of his beautiful granddaughter? The answer is we don't know, because there is no doubt that British-made arms have been used in the massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. And in spite of hollow protestations of government ministers, there is also no doubt that Israel has committed clear violations of international law, as the UN Secretary-General, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and others have said. So, Mr. Chairman, what makes the government's refusal to suspend arms sales even more horrifying is that Israeli officials have been quite open about their intent in Gaza. At the beginning of the assault, an Israeli military spokesperson said the emphasis in bombing was on, and I quote, damage, not accuracy. Another official promised to turn Gaza, again I quote, into a city of tents, while the former head of the National Security Council said that the aim was to make Gaza, and again this is a direct quote, a place where no human being could exist. The National Security Minister said that the only thing that should enter Gaza, and I quote, is not a gram of humanitarian aid, but hundreds of tons of explosives. And more recently, an Israeli minister said that the war would be Gaza's Nakba, a reference to the 1948 catastrophe where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forcibly expelled from their homes and never allowed to return. Mr. Chairman, With this stated intent and the actions that match it, UN experts have warned, and I quote, of a genocide in the making. So let us be clear. If this is a genocide in the making, British-made weapons are almost certainly part of making that genocide happen.